Forge FC is ready for their upcoming match.
Simply stunning stuff! And finally, their goal! My word, what a rocket!
Now, let's get you up to date with Anthony Urciuoli and Match Day Preview on the Forge Audio Network.
Hello, Forge fans. It is the Match Day Preview. I'm Anthony Urciuoli, bringing it to you. Forge FC hosting York United Saturday, August 20th, 7 o'clock start time. Make note of that start time because the game was originally going to be an afternoon one. It is now in prime time. Forge FC looking to get back to their winning ways after their 6-game winning streak was snapped at Calvary last match. They lost 2-1 out west. And yeah, before that 6-game winning streak, a march to the top of the table as it looks now. Forge FC with 35 points through 18 matches. They're tied with Pacific at the top. Pacific, though, has played one more match. Atletico, also at 35. They've played 2 more matches than Forge. And then Calvary's at 34 points, and they've played 20. So 20 matches to Forge's 18. So 1-4, there's 1 point separating them. Forge, though, with the matches in hand. And that will serve them well. They have to win them, though. York United, just on the opposite side of things, with 20 points through 20 matches this season in second last place. They're not going to make the playoffs, not with 8 matches remaining. And inconsistency is the name of the game for York United. They've gone win-loss their last few matches. But before that, they had gone winless in 9, and they had lost 5 matches in a row. So York has struggled with consistency. That's been the theme all season. And some odd trends to break down with York here. We are going to bring in, by the way, Mitchell Tierney from CanPL.ca to help break down this match further. He's been following York a lot closely than I have, and perhaps as closely as you have. So York has struggled to score this season. It's been an odd year. So let's break these down. Goals in open play. This is the stat that stood out to me the most. Goals in open play. Forge leads the league with 31. York with 13. That puts them 7th in the league. So what does that mean with goals in open play? Well, it is, I mean, it's goals that aren't, from set pieces, from penalties. But also, here's where things get odd. Chances in open play. York leads the league with 129. So they lead the league in chances in open play, but they are the worst in the league at goals. So is it bad luck? Is it a lack of quality? We'll get some answers to that as well. Expected goals this season, Forge in first with 31. They've actually performed above expected. York below expected. They're 7th in the league for expected goals at 21, 10 less than Forge. So the only team they've been better than has York than in expected goals and goals in open play. The only club they've been better than essentially is Edmonton. So yeah, York has been struggling. Let's maybe we can get some context here from Mitchell Tierney on what has happened with York this season. And before we get to those two clubs, I do have to ask you, this league, for an 8-team league, there are no shortage of storylines and controversies match after match. Atletico, Halifax, crazy comeback, down 2 goals. Halifax ties it. It's stoppage time. Then Atletico scores, but the flag is up for an offside. But then it wasn't an offside after a meeting, and both coaches are kind of like, what's going on? Explain to me what happened, because I still don't know.
Best I can tell, obviously, I haven't heard from the officials or anything like that. I think the flag was actually for a handball on the Halifax defender as the ball goes through. In which case, evidently the ref comes over, asks what the flag was for, finds out that it was for a handball, not for offside, and then, the goal stands as was. But I think considering how that game went, and honestly considering Atletico Ottawa's season, that was a pretty perfect moment for them, and a monumental moment that I think they'll look back on at the end of the season if they can get over the line and make the playoffs as one of those turning points where they turn 1 point or 2 points lost into 2 points gained right there at the end.
The league right now, I mean, you look at 1-4 between, I guess, what is it, Forge and then down to Calvary. There's 1 point separating the top 4 right now. Some clubs have matches in hand. I don't remember things being this close in the in the league's history this late. I mean, it's not late, but there's only like 8 games left for some clubs in the season, and it's just a logjam at the top.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's what you want in any league for there to be a great race to the finish. Obviously, you know, the regular season, as any coach will tell you, is in some ways a dress rehearsal for the playoffs. You just want to be in that top 4, as all these clubs will be. But I think that any of these clubs wants to be that top team. You know, there's some pride coming in that, regardless of whether they're willing to say it publicly or not. And also, if you get to that final, you're hosting it no matter what, if you're the top seed. And I think that is incredibly important for each of these clubs, because that is big for both on and off field, what they're trying to do long term.
Right.
So that does really matter. And I think that will make this race all the more interesting towards the end.
Yeah, I mean that is a highly coveted spot to get to secure home field advantage through the entire postseason. It's such an advantage. So clubs will play it down because they don't want to finish second and then look back at a disappointing season, or have that message delivered to their players. But clearly they want that top spot. York, I cannot figure York out this season. I don't know what they are. I don't know if they're good or not. I don't know what is their identity. What is York this season?
I don't think York can figure out York this season, which I think is a big part of why they've struggled a little bit.
Right.
I think their identity right now is still just inconsistency, which is better because there were stretches of the season when they were consistently poor, which is an improvement now. At least they have some wins coming in, but I think they're still trying to figure out their own identity as they shift in a number of new players that they brought in. One of whom I'm sure we will talk about as the show goes on. But I think they've, at least in recent weeks, been able to find more depth, been able to find a few of those players to integrate well into their system. And, certainly since the last time they met Forge, they had just brought in some of these players. Forge even took advantage of that because there was some miscommunication and some new systems that those players were learning, and Forge absolutely exploited that. But now these players have integrated well, and most of them are showing quite well for York.
So has it been a lack of quality? Some of the stats don't make any, like, for example, I was looking at goals in open play, which is a stat the league tracks, and York leads the league in chances in open play, but they're 7th in goals in open play. I mean, is it lack of quality? Can it really just be bad luck through the entire year? How do you make sense of that?
I think it's probably a combination of things. I think one of it is the fact that they haven't had much depth all year. So you are trotting out the same players game and game again. And then there's no real competition. If you're a York player for large stretches of the season, you were playing because, well, there was no one else who was going to play. So, maybe that takes off a little bit of that internal competition at times to fight for your spot. And then, at the same time, if there's not different looks and different players, then sure, they're creating a lot of chances, but they're coming from the same spot. They're coming from the same players. Perhaps, that consistency is not ideal long term. So yeah, I think it's partially unlucky. They've been very unlucky this year, as a lot of those bottom clubs can certainly claim. And at the same time, I think that lack of depth has really hurt them.
Yeah, and they're also last in the league in goals inside the box, which maybe tells you that just the attacking in terms of the forcefulness of it, and maybe the creativity is lacking a bit as well in creating those chances, for yourselves, and runs off the ball and all those kind of skilled things we talk about.
Yeah, I do think it will get better, though, especially now that they've added a guy like Ronan Krat, Lisandro Cabrera, finding the back of the net as well. He's had, if you want to talk about unlucky or not finishing chances, Cabrera is right up there in terms of players who have had good opportunities. Even, last time against Forge, I think he had one from point blank that he put over the net. So I do think that as these guys get more and more comfortable with the system, that there's going to be more of those chances. But yes, I do agree that, chances, you have to look at different factors, and I think that's a good one to look at is chances in the box, because the shots from far out or some of the half chances that York has created this year are not the same as some of the chances that a Pacific or a Ford or some of those better offensive sides will hang their hat on.
So let's talk about Mo Babuli, who, he's been spotted around Tim Hortons Field this season. When he had some time off, he would come back. Bobby talked about the culture at Forge and how that speaks to that. He still, they welcomed him in. He trained with them a couple times, but he signs with York. So what does this mean for York, and what does it mean for Babuli?
Well, I think it's great for York. We saw him off the bench in limited minutes against FC Edmonton, and he already looks like the same Mo Babuli that Forge fans will have known. I mean, the technically great, baller, for lack of a better term. He's excellent on the ball, and I think it's a good opportunity for Babuli to really be the star centerpiece of a team. York is a young side. They have a lot of inexperienced players, and they can look to a guy like Babuli, who's done incredible things within this league, within CONCACAF. He's played internationally for Canada at the youth levels. This is a very good player, and yeah, for Babuli, it's an opportunity to join a club where they're in progress right now, let's call it, and he can be a big part of moving that progress forward.
Yeah, and he returns to Tim Hortons Field fittingly, where his face is displayed inside on some of the plaques and banners from the success he had with Forge. So speaking of Forge and speaking of attackers, Babuli signing with York, Forge no shortage of attackers right now, and it's an interesting situation. I know Bobby will say it's a nice problem to have, but I do. There's a part of me that looks at the depth and the idea of too much depth in the sense that how long can certain guys go without playing as much as maybe they want to? And, there are a handful of players up front for Forge that could start for any club in the CPL, but they're not getting the minutes that maybe they would because they're playing on a better team with more depth. Do you think that would wear on some of the guys that have been around for a while and really just want to play?
Yeah, I think there's definitely two schools of thinking on this. For one, I mean, strikers, and there's another thing that Bobby talks about a lot is rhythm. And if you're coming in and out of the lineup consistently, then it's hard to keep up that rhythm. I think for a guy like Terran Campbell, that's been a challenge this year is finding rhythm. I think that's definitely going to be a challenge, especially with Hamilton now inserted into that, is how to get that rotation right, how to get the best out of all of these players when, all of them want to play consistently. But at the same time, there's something about being in that winning culture and, talking to some people. This is a big reason why Jordan Hamilton wanted to join Forge and, not some other club where, like you said, he could have been their main man. He could have started consistently. He's joining a club where they have a structure that seems to really allow new players to come in and thrive right away. And obviously Hamilton scoring almost immediately in his time at Forge is indicative of that, but it's also a winning culture. And, these guys want to be at a club where they're going to get those opportunities to win trophies. So I think that it's part and parcel of being on a top club like Forge. And obviously, yes, it will be a big undertaking for Bobby Smirniotis to make sure all of these guys are motivated and confident and ready to go when he calls upon them. But at the same time, that's Forge. That's part of their identity, and that's not going to change, I don't think, at any point going forward.
No, those are really good points. I mean, Hamilton chose to go to a team where he might not play as much, and he chose because he factored in winning and comfortability, and he knows a lot of these players, and he's obviously familiar with Bobby as well. So I mean, that's a great point too. And we talk about depth, and the back line is getting healthier now. We see Daniel Crutzen getting closer and closer as the weeks go by. You see Dominic Samuel in there. Johnny Grant is back. So when we look at this unit now, which looked so depleted at the beginning of the year, where no natural center backs were starting, now there's a lot. And all of a sudden, Alex Ashton-Yodi-Janssen, Bobby called him the best center back in the CPL this week. All of a sudden, there's a lot of depth there. A guy that's as good as Alex is now in a weird spot because he's a midfielder who prefers to play midfield, but he's a great center back, but they're also deep in both positions. He's almost in a weird in-between situation right now.
Yeah, well, I think we know very clearly, as you alluded to there, where Alex is hoping he will play the rest of the season. There's a recent press conference at Forge where they introduced him as a center back / midfielder, and he was like, no, just midfielder.
Yeah.
And that is part of the fun of being a center back for Forge is you almost get to play as a midfielder at times because you're on the ball so
Right.
much and you get to spray those balls forward. And, you honestly don't have to do all that much defending for most of the time when playing with Forge. But we do all know that he wants to be a midfielder. And look, I think however they figure it out, Alex Ashnioty-Johnson has to be on the field for Forge because he's been that good. He's been a player of the year caliber talent for Forge this year. So, Benedict Rhodes over at CanPL.ca mentioned the fact that maybe they do what they've done recently where they start him at center back and play him there probably alongside of Crutzen when he comes back. And then as the match wears on, he gets some opportunity to maybe not do a lot of running back there. And then late in the match, they shift him into midfield and he can do all of his running and that sort of thing from there. So that's one tactical thing that they can look at. But I think regardless of what happens, regardless of what group he gets into, Alex Ashnioty-Johnson needs to play.
He doesn't get a ton of, he's not in the spotlight, so to speak, because of the position that he plays in the midfield. He scored a beautiful goal this year, but Hojab Rapport is a guy that's quietly become a really dominant player at his position in this league. What do you make of Hojab Rapport's season with Forge?
Yeah, I think he's been excellent. He's another one of those guys who shows how good the Forge system is in terms of being able to come in and play a slightly new position and thrive within it. But if you look at the seasons, guys like Kyle Becker have had, Sissoko have had, a big part of that is the fact that Hojab Rapport is there doing the hard work, shielding the back four, playing those simple passes that allow Becker to get into the position to play the more complicated passes. I think he's been absolutely excellent this year, and he's one of those, as you said, underrated guys that in a Forge team that has a lot of stars and a lot of players that people talk about week in, week out, Hojab Rapport has quietly been one of the better ones, and you need guys like that to perform within their roles if you're going to be a top team.
Okay, so York and Forge, what are your, maybe not predictions, but how do you see this playing out? Is it an uphill battle for York?
It's definitely an uphill battle for York, but almost similarly to the last match that Forge played against Cavalry. This is a match that, in theory and on paper, means a lot more to York probably than it does to Forge. And same with Cavalry really wanting to beat Forge. At this point in the season, York is 14 points out of the playoffs. Very unlikely they claw back into that. But in showing what they can do and reaching their peak potential, probably the best way to do that possibly would be to beat their rival on the road at Tim Hortons Field. So I think that York, for a lot of reasons, will be right up for this match, and that's going to present some challenges to Forge because, as we said, this is a much better York side. They have many more options. They're a lot more integrated within the system than the last time these two sides played, and we've seen them cause Forge issues throughout this season in terms of the style they play. So this is going to be a good match. I'm really excited for it. I think that of the matches that we've seen between these two sides this year, this is probably the most exciting.
All right, Mitchell Tierney doing some great stuff with CanPL.ca. Thanks a lot for joining.
Yeah, thanks as always for having me. Always a pleasure.
That was Mitchell Tierney. I am Anthony Urciuoli. Before you go, there's a lot you need to know about this Saturday's match with Forge and York. If you haven't gotten your tickets, you can do so now. There's a lot of activities going on off the pitch as well. First of all, $5 beers before kickoff. That's something we've become accustomed to at Forge matches at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton. So that's when gates open. So between 6 and 7, get your $5 beers. Inflatables, lawn games, mascots, prizes are all back in the Stipley fan zone. That is on the south side of the stadium. That's going on before and during the match. Before, you're going to want to get there early and take advantage of that time. You don't want to miss any of the match, but you want to have fun with the inflatables, the games, the mascots, and the prizes. So go a little early, go to the Stipley fan zone. After the match, though, Families on the Pitch is back. Also, there will be a team autograph session. After the match, head to the field. Players will be there. You can get some photos and you can get some autographs. So many reasons to make it down to Tim Hortons Field for Forge versus York. And keep it tuned in however you get your Forge content, whether via podcast or on YouTube or on social media. 3 keys to the match coming up to get you fully prepared for York and Forge, and immediately following the match, make sure to check back, subscribe for the match in review. All right, Forge fans, I will be there Saturday. I hope to see you there.
Forge FC is prepared, and now you are informed. This has been Match Day Preview with Anthony Urciuoli on the Forge Audio Network. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.